What is the worst thing the CIA ever did? Former CIA employee here. In my view, it was the moment they lost their initial mission: observe, analyze, coordinate. Actually doing stuff, changing outcomes, was outside the agency's purpose from the beginning. The saying goes, all Truman wanted was a newspaper. Literally, at its creation, and in its name, the CIA's mission was supposed to be intelligence, gathering information, and central, taking information from multiple sources, analyzing and synthesizing it, and coordinating among government agencies. It's telling that the Director of Central Intelligence, DCI, was not called the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. In the original conception, the idea was that the DCI would be more like today's Director of National Intelligence, DNI, charged primarily with coordinating and information sharing. The DCI was specifically chartered with coordinating the work of other government entities like the FBI, the military, other security agencies, etc. That didn't happen. What happened was that every new government entity declared its own fiefdom and refused to share information with others, for security reasons. Further, the CIA decided that it wasn't content to just observe happenings around the world, it decided it could and should intervene. Then, 9/11. Everyone was like, why can't all our intelligence agencies talk to each other and share information? Clearly we need to reorganize everything. Hence the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, which was supposed to alleviate the problem of too many agencies who don't talk to each other. Except that's also not what happened. DHS became its own bureaucracy, which would not share with other agencies. So then people decided to create the Director of National Intelligence, DNI, specifically tasked with interagency coordination. Then DNI became its own bureaucracy, which would not share with other agencies. TLDR, the CIA should never have been doing things in foreign countries in the first place. It should have been observing, collecting information, and reporting back to policymakers. The CIA should never have been in the business of killing people and overthrowing governments. MK Ultra. Importing heroin from the Golden Triangle causing a nationwide addiction. Importing cocaine from South America. Guatemala syphilis experiments, quote wiki, doctors infected 1,300 people, including at least 600 soldiers and people from various impoverished groups, including, but not limited to, sex workers, orphans, inmates of mental hospitals, and prisoners, with syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid, without the informed consent of the subjects. Operation Northwoods, a false flag operation meant to be conducted with the assistance of the Department of Defense in order to commit terrorist attacks on the US population and blame the whole thing on Cuba so that America would support war on Cuba. They've done a lot of things, but I think selling Iran missiles so they could funnel the money to the Contras and their death squads so they could smuggle crack and heroin into the US is probably the biggest whammy in one event. 3 countries fucked at once, and arguably the cause of the US opiate crisis. The real reason civil wars took place in all Central America, provoking mass exodes from there to USA, thousands die and thousands emigrated, also behind Chile dictator Pinochet, the list goes on and on. So if you are the kind of people that complain about illegal aliens coming here, let me tell you is your fault. You voted for the people that took the decision and caused many civil wars in the first place in all that Americas. Thank you very much. Regime changes brought to you by the CIA have extended the life of authoritarianism around the world, not thwarted it, even the successful regime changes. Nearly everything we know about CIA covert operations says that they are actively trying to destroy the United States, not advance its interests. I say that because in every CIA story, there is always some guy pointing out how obviously stupid and dangerous it is, and some impetuous dude that just wants to push people out of helicopters and drug their coworkers to see what will happen. They know full well that people will eventually know that they imprisoned, enslaved, lied, beat, tortured, maimed, and killed people of other sovereign nations because the systems of government they were convinced were doomed to fail weren't failing fast enough. They have provided nothing but counterpoints to the statement, America is a force for good in the world. The CIA has been involved in many controversial and morally dubious actions throughout its history, so it's difficult to point to one specific event as the worst thing the agency has ever done. Some of the most well-known examples of the CIA's controversial actions include overthrowing democratically elected governments. The CIA has been involved in the overthrow of numerous democratically elected governments, including Iran in 1953 and Chile in 1973. These actions were done to further U.S. interests and often involved the installation of brutal dictators. MKUltra. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA conducted a program called MKUltra, which involved the use of mind control techniques on unwitting subjects. This included experiments with drugs like LSD, which were administered without consent and led to some tragic outcomes. Operation Phoenix. During the Vietnam War, the CIA conducted a program called Operation Phoenix, which involved the assassination of thousands of suspected Viet Cong members and their sympathizers. The program has been criticized for its brutality and lack of due process. Torture. The CIA has been accused of using torture in its interrogation of suspects, including the use of techniques like waterboarding. This has been condemned by many human rights groups as a violation of international law. Overall, the CIA's history is riddled with instances of morally dubious and sometimes illegal actions. It's difficult to say which of these actions was the worst, as they all represent a violation of the trust that citizens place in their government to act in their best interests. They kidnapped civilians from countries abroad, brought them to illegal prisons, and tortured them for months, sometimes even years. Some of these people were later brought to Guantanamo illegally, where their torture continued, in some of the drastic cases, for a long time. In my opinion, this is worse than the coups and the likewise horrible violence that came with them, because these were orchestrated together with local combatants and the CIA often only had an advisory and steering role. In contrast, the CIA was directly involved in torture in secret prisons. Nobody involved in this has ever been brought to justice. The Iran-Contra affair. The CIA sold weapons to an American enemy and used the proceeds to fund South American cartels. These cartels flooded U.S. streets with crack and began an epidemic. Consequences if this include a more armed Iran, violent cartels able to exert increasing control over South America, a crack epidemic leading to lots of death/poverty. Worth noting that this also had a disproportionate effect on black people. The impacts of this can still widely be felt today, yet Reagan receives very little flack for it today. Fuck Reagan. Personally, I think them spending $20 million on a spy cat and then letting it get run over by a taxi and die almost immediately after starting its first assignment deserves an honorable mention. What idiots! I think the CIA had a role in the downfall of Venezuela in the last 10 years. I think because their leader was getting all chummy with Castro and thumbing their nose at America, our CIA retaliated by convincing the US to invest heavily into shale production. This caused the Venezuelan government to flood the market with oil to destroy the shale market. This also caused the Saudis to dump even more oil onto the market, causing the price to get so low that Venezuela's economy spiraled out of control.